Good afternoon. My name is Angela Panmaka, and I'm the designated federal officer for the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. Welcome to all of our virtual attendees. Today's meeting is being live streamed to allow members of the public to attend the virtual meeting and is also being recorded and will be posted on our website. As we begin our second live stream plenary meeting, allow me to share a few procedural remarks. This commission is an independent presidential advisory committee operating under the Federal Advisory Committee Act and the Government in the Sunshine Act. Today's meeting was announced in a Federal Register notice on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. The public was invited to submit written comments for the commission to consider. One comment was received through our invitation and is considered public, which will also be posted along with the meeting minutes. There have been no significant changes to today's meeting agenda as posted in the Federal Register notice. Depending on our time constraints, there may be an opportunity for members of the public to provide written comments or questions to the commission today at the end of this meeting. For those joining us via the live stream, you can provide comments or questions via Twitter by tweeting or messaging at AI Commission and via our YouTube live meeting comments section. With that, I say welcome and I call this meeting to order. I will now turn the meeting over to the Commission's Executive Director, Ili Bajraktardi, for opening remarks.
Hey, you're on mute.
Good afternoon. My name is Ili Bajraktardi, and I serve as the Executive Director to the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. It is my pleasure to welcome commissioners as well as members of the general public to today's Q3 plenary meeting. To members of the general public and media, on behalf of NSCAI commissioners and ourselves, I would like to thank you for your interest in the work of the Commission and for your participation in today's plenary meeting via live stream. We have received more than 170 RSVPs from the members of the public, along with 8 members of the press. The Commission remains eager to hear from you as we examine the most significant national security dimensions of artificial intelligence. As mentioned by the designated federal officer, those tuning in today can provide comments or questions via Twitter or YouTube. We also have a request for comment in the Federal Register, where individuals and organizations can submit comments to the Commission regarding topics within its congressional mandate. To NSCAI commissioners, the purpose of today's virtual public plenary meeting is to deliberate and vote on the 2020 interim report and the Q3 recommendations for Congress and the executive branch. Each line of effort chair will deliver 5-minute remarks that present the set of recommendations for deliberation. NSCAI professional staff are standing by to answer any factual questions if needed. Votes will be called for affirmative response, negative response, and abstentions. Recommendations must receive a majority vote to pass. Results of the vote will be announced. I would now like to ask Dr. Eric Schmidt and Mr. Robert Ward to deliver a few remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Ili, and thank you all for being part of this. We're excited to have, I think this is our second public FACA compliant commission, and we actually like this because the transparency, I think, is really positive. So this is our 8th plenary session. We've been doing a lot of work. The purpose of today's meeting is for us to review, deliberate, and vote on a number of recommendations, which you're going to hear a lot about. My own opinion, and I think the commissioners believe this as well, is that regardless of what happens in the upcoming election, the next administration should immediately implement the Commission's nonpartisan recommendation that we're going to approve. So we're sort of timing this for the next administration, whichever one it is, to have something that they can action on. There are sort of 3 rough areas that you're going to hear about. The first is organizing for AI and emerging technologies competition. It's pretty clear that AI is really a metaphor for many other things as well, as the competitive environment and the national security environment changes globally. And I'm convinced that AI and emerging technologies are the cornerstone of our national competitiveness, and they require very sustained attention at the highest levels of our government. And we have a set of recommendations, including some organizational things and so forth, that are consistent with that. Another thing we spend a lot of time talking about is democratizing the AI innovation and expanding the AI talent pipeline. We've talked about this with those of you who've been following us before. From my perspective, when I look at the federal government, it has the responsibility and the opportunity to unleash American innovation by creating an AI research environment second to none. And we have the lead. It's important we keep the lead. Another thing that we don't talk enough about, in my view, is the importance of AI cooperation internationally. We are stronger because of our allies and partners, and the Commission is going to recommend, I think, ways for the United States to adopt a framework for a comprehensive strategy to marshal international cooperation to win this AI competition. So the Commission staff's been doing great work, and I hope you enjoy the next couple of hours as we go through this in great detail. Over to Bob, Vice Commissioner and good friend. You're muted, Bob.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of those who are listening in this afternoon to our plenary session, and to thank you for taking the time. As Eric said, the Commission is unanimous in the thought that we have to get this AI competition right. And the fact that you're taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in to our deliberations gives us a lot of, makes us very happy, because this is such an important topic. Now, let me just reinforce what Eric said. This has been a truly bipartisan journey because it is a bipartisan priority to get AI right. And we want to thank our partners in the executive branch, Congress, and across the United States. We've received tremendous support. Today, we will discuss our third set of quarterly recommendations and make an interim 2020 report. As Eric said, they're going to reinforce a few big ideas that have consistently run through our work since our 2019 interim report. But laying out a vision is not enough. A winning strategy requires serious understanding and consideration of the technical, bureaucratic, and human obstacles to change. We have organized several lines of effort. For those of you with access to the memo, the summary of recommendations provide an overview, and the corresponding tabs provide the details of the why and the how. This afternoon, we're going to hear from several of the LOE leads. First, leading in research and development, line of effort number 1. We must expand and democratize basic AI research, as Eric said. Federal support remains absolutely critical. We believe as a commission that we must increase federal support for AI innovators and find ways to lower the barrier to accessing structured data and computing power. We need a wide and diverse research ecosystem, including the national security enterprise, and we need the government to become a better partner to the private sector. We're committed to making all of those happen. LOE2 is fielding national security applications. We have to connect the technologists and the operators in the Department of Defense and the Department of Defense with the intelligence community so that we're all working together to solve this problem and to move the AI state of the art forward. Technologists at every level must have the authority to prioritize and resource technology development. Doing so creates a powerful catalyst for decentralized AI innovation. LOE3 is growing talent and workforce. All AI roads lead back to talent. Building on our bolder recommendations from past quarters, including the creation of a U.S. Digital Service Academy, we provide additional ideas for increasing the national workforce digital proficiency and bridging the technological deficit at its source, the lack of STEM-educated Americans. LOE4, Protect and Build on U.S. Tech Advantages on the Hardware, really focuses on the hardware, crucially microelectronics. The U.S. advantage in this area is substantial and must be extended. We provide ideas for building a resilient domestic base for the industry. We also expand our vision into sustaining leadership in the constellation of technologies AI will transform. In that regard, we prioritize 2 technologies, biotechnology and quantum computing. LOE5 is marshaling global AI cooperation. Domestic initiatives are not going to be enough. Winning the AI competition and using AI to protect democracies will require strengthening core security alliances, deepening AI-related connections with key partners, with a special focus on the European Union and India, and ensuring multilateral forums that will shape the norms and technical standards for AI development that reflect our interests and values. The AI competition is very much a values competition. Now, our runner show today will be to review and discuss the recommendations of the third quarter report. Each of our topic chairpersons is going to lead a 20-minute discussion, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions submitted from the public. But let me close with an important point. Ethics considerations have infused every aspect of our deliberations. Since releasing our key considerations for responsible use of AI in July, we have focused on helping departments and agencies across the US government, as well as our international partners, to operationalize these ideas. Dr. Horowitz has led these efforts, and I'd like him to outline our report. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Eric Horowitz, and I've been serving as chair of the line of effort, LOE 6, which is focused on ethics and responsible AI. Now, in quarter two, we issued a key considerations paradigm that included 32 recommended practices across the AI lifecycle for the responsible development and fielding of AI systems. Our work in quarter three has concentrated on intensive efforts to communicate our key considerations to multiple stakeholders around the world, and more importantly, to seek feedback from the stakeholders, including departments and agencies critical to national security, experts and organizations who have been passionate about ethics and responsible uses of AI, and with the public. And we'll be using this feedback to guide the refinement of our key considerations in the final report due out next year. We'll be providing further recommendations on implementing the key considerations across national security departments and agencies. Now, at the same time, we also elevated the cross-cutting key considerations into discussions that have fed into the ultimate recommendations of other LOEs at quarter three, including LOE 1 on R&D, LOE 2 on AI national security, and LOE 5 on marshaling international partnerships. As an example, my colleague Safra Katz, who chairs LOE 2, will be presenting a recommendation that the key considerations on ethical and responsible AI should inform the intelligence community CTO in establishing common standards and policies to rapidly and responsibly scale AI applications across the intelligence community. Our main recommendation is on integrating the key considerations into LOE 5's work on marshaling international partnerships, which will be introduced by my fellow commissioner, Jason Matheny. As the Departments of State and Defense engage with NATO and allies to develop and implement a comprehensive AI strategy, we propose that they use the Commission's key considerations paradigm as a blueprint for how the Alliance can put into practice overarching and shared principles on the responsible development and fielding of AI. In particular, we recommend prioritizing efforts to achieve common documentation requirements, establish confidence in systems of systems, which is what we have when we work with other nations, and to ensure the robustness and reliability of AI applications, including the critical area of readying for and mitigating expected adversarial machine learning attacks. Together with LOE 5, we further explain that the key considerations should inform the blueprints for international cooperation and be top of mind when prioritizing cooperative projects and applications for international or cross-border research and development. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Moore, who will present on LOE 1's quarter three recommendations. Andrew.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to me. It's both a privilege and a responsibility to chair LOE 1, which is investigating the United States efforts in AI research and development. My fellow commissioners are Eric Horowitz, Bill Mark, Ken Ford, and Steve Chen, and we're supported by an extremely able staff. So thank you to everyone who's done this. In quarter one, we looked at the broad AI R&D environment, and we recommended federal investments to strengthen the foundation. In quarter two, we focused on the DoD research enterprise, and we recommended actions to overcome the quite significant organizational, bureaucratic, and culture constraints which are putting some of the federal apparatus at a disadvantage compared with other sectors of the economy. This quarter, we looked at how everything comes together. And we've identified the actions we believe are needed to create a triangular alliance between the federal government, industry, and academia. And it's only with this triangular alliance do we think that we're going to make the progress that we need. You're about to hear recommendations on 3 priority issues from LOE1. Supporting the growth of nationwide AI R&D, posturing the defense and intelligence community AI R&D to address national security specific problems. And to do this, we will be talking about how a modern ecosystem for AI practice is needed. And thirdly, my colleague Steve Chen will be talking about how we can expand the role of industry in DoD's AI R&D to pursue the next generation capabilities. So, as far as the first issue is concerned, which is the growth of nationwide AI R&D, we've already in our interim report been really clear that business as usual is not acceptable. Even in the lifetime of this commission, the state of artificial intelligence technology through research and development has changed in ways that none of us were expecting even at the start of the commission. There's a real sense of urgency, and we now see ways that machines with what are frankly superhuman abilities to concentrate on millions or hundreds of millions of events happening at once can understand a situation, and then single artificial intelligences can be simultaneously providing advice and information to hundreds and sometimes thousands of humans in reacting to important situations. So things are moving, but they're not moving fast enough in terms of the United States capabilities in artificial intelligence. So this quarter, our recommendations are around in this first issue, our recommendations are around 5 actions to strengthen federal support for the AI R&D environment to make sure that we stay on the forefront of this stuff. First, create an AI Innovator Award program to invest in top talent. We do need people, the world's best experts in artificial intelligence, to be charting the next few years and ultimately the next few decades of artificial intelligence. This is the foundation which, if you look at the amazing things which are happening in the economy now, thanks to artificial intelligence, they were founded by these individual academic geniuses in some cases in the field of AI, many of them in the United States. Secondly, we have to invest in research teams pursuing transformative ideas in AI. AI is no longer anything like a purely research exercise. You have to practice bringing significant groups of people together who can work together, throw the ball to each other in developing important AIs. Thirdly, we're recommending the creation of AI test beds to serve the academic and industry research communities. So we cannot measure our progress unless we can test how the systems that we're building for the benefit of national security are operating. And we have more detailed suggestions as to how we can have this test bed in place. Fourth, we need to support AI dataset curation and maintenance. So data is a critical aspect of all artificial intelligences. And in some areas of artificial intelligence, the extent to which your AI is going to perform is equal to the extent to which you have data available. Usually, for most applications, data exists somewhere, but it's very hard, especially within a siloed federal government, for the right people to access the right data at the right time with the right privileges and authorities. So we will invest in a system which allows authorized sharing of data much more effectively. Finally, the fifth recommendation for issue 1 is to launch an AI research challenge. These challenge types of goals have historically been a big spurring function for new developments in artificial intelligence. I'm going to jump onto the second issue because I want to give folks time to have a discussion about this. So I'm going to move fairly quickly. Second issue we addressed was the posture inside the national security agencies to take up advancements from the open environment to apply to national security specific problems and build tailored solutions in collaboration with internal and external partners. And we found that there's many components throughout the national security space, but we don't have a substrate to bring them together. So for US national security and defense to realize a future that incorporates AI-driven capabilities at scale and speed, we feel it is essential to build a digital AI R&D ecosystem that serves the broader national security system, bringing together critically necessary infrastructure, resources, and services. So just to be clear, as you have hundreds of thousands of folks working to build AI systems, they have to have common data models, common infrastructures, common methods for accessing data, common ways of searching for the right tools for the right jobs. And if we leave that to be a scattershot approach for lots of individuals across the community, we'll be doing those individuals a disservice. I'm going to, at this point, hand over to the rest of my commissioners for a sort of follow-up discussion on these first two issues that we've been addressing this quarter in LOE 1. Again, repeating the novel funding mechanisms and the desire to create a national ecosystem for national security to be able to share in their AI developments.
My fellow commissioners, this is Bob. This would be a time for anybody to bring up any concerns, any observations on Andrew's recommendations. Would any of the commissioners like to be recognized?
I would. This is Safra.
Go ahead, Safra.
So I think that this is very critical. What is going on here is because this whole sharing and cooperating and coordination is very important and really has to start at the research level early on. And so there's no question that implementing these recommendations is critical for the next step, which actually ends up in my LOE, but it really does have to start at this group because this is really where the most important technology advancements start.
Thank you. I agree with that. And I also note that frequently in the worlds of computer science, mathematics, and natural sciences, the big breakthroughs have come when smart researchers are working inspired by the important problems of society. And we get much more from that than if the pure research and the actual needs were separated. So that's why LOE 1 and LOE 2, chaired by Commissioner Katz, are so interleaved in what they're doing.
Any other commissioners?
Do you want to, this is Eric, do you want to comment at all about the research challenge and what you think it might be?
We actually do not want to sort of speculate on this at the moment. We do not have a formal recommendation, but the notion is to test AI systems or systems of systems, things where you've got many components which have to be brought together. We'll be taking inspirations from the kinds of things pioneered by, for example, the JAIC with their humanitarian assistance and disaster response projects, which were specifically designed to be both useful, inspiring, and require many pieces of technologies to be brought together rather than just applying one big hammer to a problem.
I have a question from one of the, sorry, Gilman, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have a question from Matt Sheehan. He's asking, curious to hear suggestions from Mr. Moore or others on what problems, topics would be good candidates for an AI research grand challenge.
Well, very similar to my response to Eric Schmidt. The kind of problems we're looking for are things which are of societal importance and require systems to work together. If you think of something like the moon landings or the Manhattan Project, that was not one piece of technology. It was actually the integration of many pieces of technology which was important. So the kinds of grand challenges in the past, things like DARPA's autonomous driving challenges, or major challenges in computers understanding written text with big challenges run by NIST. Those are the class of challenges, and we will be looking for ones which can operate in the public domain on items of significant importance.
So Andrew, I can think of a number that might span that. One is obviously language understanding. Another one is something involving autonomy, but that's just my opinion. Maybe my fellow LOE1 commissioners could put some categories out to try to stimulate discussion about what these things are, because as I completely agree with you all that these things drive enormous achievement when they're done right. They're very important.
Yeah.
Look at the impact of ImageNet alone.
Yeah, I'll make a few comments that there are different ways to cut how we frame research challenges. But as Eric just mentioned, and Andrew before him, the idea of coming up with some real world oriented framing concrete challenges that then require innovation on multiple well-known frontier areas of artificial intelligence can really help push innovation. For example, this idea of building systems that have richer understanding of meaning, that work less at the level of surface, building systems that are less brittle and narrow, that can be transferred across different domains with ease, building technologies or developing technologies that can learn from unsupervised data or data in the wild. And the whole idea of bringing together not just systems of systems, but different kinds of AI technologies, bringing together natural language with vision, for example, in multimodal systems that can interact with people.
Let me give a few. I sense a real desire to hear some specifics. So here's something which is not ready right now. We couldn't build it right now, but I think if it were a challenge, it might get built within 5 years, which is human medevac. Evacuation or on-site treatment for folks in very dangerous situations where you cannot send in human rescuers to help save them. Another one would be the very accurate predictive forecasting over the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, and 5 days as what's happening during a fire or flood situation, so that rescuers have actual maps of how things will be in 2 hours to work with rather than guessing. These are the kind of things which I'm nervous to say them publicly because I don't quite know if they're going to be technologically possible within the next few years, but they are the kind of things which will bring together natural language processing, human understanding, scene recognition, and then advanced optimization and planning to actually form an entire system.
Right, and just to add to one of Andrew's examples, given that a number of us are in the Pacific Northwest or in California, where fires have been top of mind, It's not just predicting, but it's developing action plans, understanding ideal interventions in the world that might really bring the rubber to meet the road on a concrete challenge.
Well, commissioners, to remain on time, I would like to call for a vote on the 5 specific recommendations presented by Dr. Moore. And what I'll do is I'll ask for all of those that are in favor of the block, and then I will ask the commissioners for anyone who has who votes against a recommendation or abstains, and that way we can have everything on the record. So again, what I'd like to do is ask each of the commissioners to vote for the block of the 5 recommendations that Andrew just presented. So I'd ask that everyone in favor of these recommendations, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Are there any commissioners who object to any of the recommendations and vote nay? Hearing none, do any of the commissioners wish to abstain? And I should say, for those of you who want to explore these recommendations more in depth in the 4th quarter, this is another option for you to do so. So I'll ask you, do any of the commissioners want to take any of the 5 recommendations, pull them off of the 3rd quarter report, and dive deeper into them into the 4th quarter? All right, hearing none, do any of the commissioners abstain on voting on any of the 5 recommendations? All right, we have unanimous approval of the 5 recommendations. Thank you very much, Andrew. And now we have to move directly to Steve Chin, who will brief issue 3 and has 3 more recommendations for us to consider.
Sorry, every time this switches, it changes the layout.
And Steve, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay, first, thank you very much for the honor and responsibility of leading this particular element of LOE 1. I'm very privileged to lead this topic of government industry cooperation on AI R&D. In our interim report to Congress, the Commission concluded that industry must play an essential role in securing and expanding U.S. AI leadership. American companies represent a principal component of AI research and development. They have tremendous investments in R&D, as well as access to top talent, and this results in an incredible generation of technology breakthroughs that hold significant potential for reinforcing U.S. national security. However, there have been challenges in the DoD fully leveraging industry AI expertise. One of the challenges has been unclear signaling of future directions and future investment intentions. In particular, this makes it difficult for industry to proactively engage in investments that would help in this collaboration. Furthermore, one of the challenges in the DoD's ability to drive large-scale progress in next-generation AI for DoD applications is hampered by the existing pathways for collaboration. They're not optimized for AI R&D, nor for the best model of development of these technologies and techniques that we've seen, which is continuous experimentation of use-inspired research and continuous prototyping. And this is the best way to achieve rapid and sustained progress. While Pathfinder organizations have shown considerable progress, they continue to face many challenges transitioning viable advances from prototypes to operational DoD customers. So over the past few months, the Commission has engaged with firms of all sizes, investment types, and also with USG officials to gain multiple perspectives on the ways that the Commission can best help fill these gaps. And the result of that is these 3 recommendations that are built around 1, enhancing DoD's communication and collaboration with the private sector, and 2, supporting the efficient scaling and integration of critical AI technologies. So first, to facilitate DoD industry collaboration in AI, the Commission recommends the DoD communicate modernization priorities to industry through the issuance of a technology R&D objective, specifically in the area of AI. These should be living documents produced by the the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for R&E to support existing modernization priority roadmaps and encourage industry to direct investments in coordination and lockstep with national security priorities. Second, to facilitate application in the field of AI, the Commission recommends that the DoD review, modernize, and streamline its small business innovation research process to strengthen return on investment and to encourage a broader participation of American technology startup and small business companies. By aligning the SBIR awards, the DoD SBIR awards, with the modernization priorities and funding successful prototypes, the DoD can boost transition of technologies into fieldable systems. And finally, the DoD should launch an AI Catalyst initiative to accelerate private sector research into longer-term, next-generation AI-enabled defense capabilities, jointly overseen by the Office of the Undersecretary, Secretary of Defense for R&D, and executed perhaps by DARPA or the services innovation entities. The AI Catalyst initiative would facilitate and fund multi-year partnerships between a service component and 2 or more private sector companies. This integrated, use-inspired approach to R&D would help to drive problem solving on key research priorities. Together, these recommendations would streamline both the communication between government and industry and support collaboration for high-impact, next-generation AI innovation that's mutually beneficial to the public and private sectors. So with that, I'll open up to my colleagues for discussion.
Do any commissioners have anything to add to Steve's discussion and recommendation? All right, then. We can move right to voting.
Sure. I'll go with the questions from online, just so we have our public engaged. Tim Liu says, why not use a dual-use capital approach? Investing in AI entrepreneurs, startups around DC create more R&I and more AI jobs. So for anyone who wants to take that, I think it's more of a comment than question, but.
Well, I think that those avenues already exist through existing organizations. Maybe Gilman or Chris could talk about that.
Or this is Gilman. You know, I think some of us are, you know, very much aligned with that comment. It's kind of the foundational creations of organizations like InQtel and DIU, as well as the initiatives within the departments on using OTAs and SBIRs to really engage with entrepreneurs and small and mid-sized companies to bring the talent around the problems that we face. So, you know, I am highly supportive of those, particularly those things that have dual use, right? Because we get into leverage both the commercial markets, the consumer markets, and align that with the best quality of technology and make those technologies also available for national security reasons.
Yeah, I just want to add that although I too very much appreciate that suggestion, I think it should be incorporated. We have to remember that there are some parts of AI which need massive investment that only the large companies and federal governments can go after. This includes things like quantum computing or massive distributed supercomputers or some very advanced sensing capabilities, which I do not expect to be able to come out of VC-funded small business sectors.
Any other issues or discussion? All right, then I will call for a vote. I want to make one modification. We will vote a block of 4 recommendations. I did not include issue 2 that was covered by Dr. Moore, which was creating a digital ecosystem for national security, AI R&D. So I'd like to roll that into this package. So we will actually be voting on the 3 recommendations that Commissioner Chin presented to us, plus the digital ecosystem idea that Dr. Moore provided us. All in favor of these 4 recommendations, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Do any of the commissioners want to take any of the recommendations and remove them from the 3rd quarter report and take a deeper dive into them in the 4th quarter? All right, hearing none, would any of the commissioners need to or like to abstain on any of the 4 recommendations? Hearing none, let the record show that we have unanimous agreement or consensus on the 4 recommendations, and this ends the recommendations for line of effort 1. I'd like to thank Dr. Moore and Steve Chen for presenting these, and we are going to move right into line of effort 2, which is to apply AI to national security missions. And so this will be led by Safra Katz. Safra, over to you.
Thanks, Bob. And let me first thank both my fellow commissioners, which are the Honorable Katrina McFarland, you, Bob, in fact, who are the vice chair, Andy Jassy, Dr. Steve Chen, and Dr. Ken Ford, and of course the staff that has worked tirelessly for this effort. It is very clear that to win in a technological competition, the Department of Defense and the intelligence community have to be organized for both speed and agility, integrating the perspectives of both the technologists and the operators on the ground, and that coordination has to be at every level. In the 1st and 2nd quarter, this LOE offered recommendations to advance DoD adoption of AI-enabled applications by creating a senior leadership structure to drive action and improve methods for identifying and prioritizing AI-enabled technologies, and in addition, promoting the adoption of business AI applications. We believe these recommendations are critical first steps to accelerate DoD AI application in the near term. We're very grateful for the legislative support that these recommendations have received in both the House and the Senate. In the 3rd quarter, we build upon this work, aiming to deliver a complete leadership and policy ecosystem to improve both the DoD and IC's ability to apply AI to national security challenges. To accelerate adoption of AI and related technologies, the Commission proposes options to maximize the impact of DoD's Chief Technology Officer, the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, and to designate an intelligence community CTO. Again, we believe that organization matters in outcomes. Specifically, these 3rd quarter recommendations seek to empower DoD and IC CTOs to effectively drive technology strategy, inform supporting requirements, concepts, prototyping, and experimentation, and develop common technical standards and policies. Drive rapid adoption of emerging technologies through AI-enabled technology scouting. Again, learning from everything that's going on around the world, both in industry and in government. Also, provide a dedicated fund to accelerate transition of AI technologies into programs of record, and build a coordinated and federated approach to applying AI-enabled applications to open source intelligence in all intelligence domains. Together, our LOE's recommendations for quarter 1, 2, and 3 drive the necessary strategic change across the DoD and the IC to create an enduring ability to deliver AI-enabled capabilities to the warfighter at speed and at scale. Collectively, these recommendations enable closer coordination and rapid action among the military services and intelligence agencies as they conduct research and development, planning, budgeting, and acquisition activities. LOE2 has put forward 7 recommendations, including 3 DoD recommendations and 4 IC recommendations. So I'm going to start with the DoD recommendations. The first one is for the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering that should integrate DoD's technology scouting community of practice, leveraging AI-enabled analytics to provide authoritative technology inputs for national security planning. What we recommend is that the DoD assign USD-R&E as the executive agent responsible for producing the National Defense Strategy Technology Annex, convening a technology scouting community of practice to collaborate in development of the annex. We also recommend that USD-R&E reestablish the Strategic Intelligence Analysis Cell, which has been reduced in scope, that we reestablish the SIAC director as a direct report to the USD-R&E and increase SIAC funding for expanded investments in AI tools, commercial data, and a diverse technology fellows program that takes people from all of the services and brings them in to share what is actually necessary on the ground. In recommendation 2, USD-R&E should be appointed the co-chair and chief science advisor to the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, the JROC, for joint and cross-domain capabilities. To accelerate application of AI and other emerging technologies for competitive advantage, USD-R&E must play a central role in connecting the technological advancements in the R&D to the joint operational requirements. The recommendation to make USD-R&E a co-chair on the JROC will help ensure technical expertise informs DoD's requirements process. And finally, recommendation 3, USD-R&E should have funds to mature, operationally prototype, and transition AI-enabled technologies. The DoD's budget process poses a very significant obstacle to transitioning advances in the lab to capabilities in the field. In the current budget system, and given today's rate of technological change, we basically have a mismatch. Technology changes quickly and new things are identified and look promising. But then the acquisition cycle takes so long, the budget cycle, that many of these projects have nowhere to go and no funding and can't make that leap. So what we believe is without available program funds at the end of a defense science and technology project's life, the technology simply falls away. So to move as fast as our competitors and maintain the defense advantage, DoD has to have a means to support these promising AI projects beyond early stage R&D, even when the planned program funding isn't yet in place. All right, with all that, let me open the floor for discussion on the 3 DoD recommendations I just described. I can't tell. Anyone have anything they want to say?
Billy, have any questions come in from the audience on these recommendations?
Not on these particular recommendations.
So,
Okay.
so Safra, I wanted to say that my experience with the military is that it's extremely hierarchical, and that it's sort of obvious if you think about it, and that the hierarchical nature means that resources follow the hierarchical tree. And so my feedback would be, unless we adopt your recommendation or something similar, we won't get enough resources, money, that sort of thing to AI. This is not because the people aren't well-meaning. It's just that what I've learned is that there's competing priorities that get forgotten about. So I think you have said, and I believe, that this competition around AI is going to be the fundamental defense challenge over the next, say, maybe 10 years. So it seems to me that we should state that, along with your recommendation, we should say that very clearly, right? Along with your recommendation to have the structure that you're arguing for. So I support it, obviously.
Fantastic. I very much appreciate it. So let me now, since I went quite long, let me go ahead and ask if there's a motion to vote on these as a group. Or
Yes, thanks.
So move.
Yeah, thanks, Safra. I was going to ask, we are going to be voting as a block for recommendations 1, 2, and 3 on issue 1, the Department of Defense, as just outlined by Safra. All those commissioners in favor of these recommendations, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any of the commissioners wish to remove any of the recommendations off the Q3 report and take a deeper dive into them during the 4th quarter? All right, hearing none, would any of the commissioners like to abstain from voting on the recommendations outlined by Safra? Hearing none, we have unanimous consensus on the recommendations, Q3 recommendations for the Department of Defense and LOE 2. And Safra, we are running a little behind, so I'd ask that your presentation on the Intel community try to wrap up in no more than 5 minutes.
no problem. What I'm going to do then is, because we describe it all anyway, and we've kind of partially covered it, I'm just going to read through the recommendations. Recommendation 4, within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of S&T should be designated as the IC's CTO and empowered to enable the IC to adopt AI-enabled applications to solve operational intelligence requirements. This is all about collaboration. Recommendation 5, the IC CTO, in coordination with USDR&E, should develop a technology annex to the National Intelligence Strategy that establishes technology roadmaps to adopt AI-enabled applications to solve operational intelligence requirements. Recommendation 6, the IC CTO should establish common technical standards and policies necessary to rapidly scale AI applications across the IC and have the authority to enforce them across the IC. And then finally, recommendation 7, the IC should develop a coordinated and federated approach to applying AI-enabled applications to open source intelligence. For this one, I just want to comment, because this is a little bit different. There will always be a need for traditional intelligence methods and classified intelligence, but the IC must rethink integrating AI-enabled analysis of open source and publicly available information in all its work streams. because there is so much generated publicly that is valuable and that could work very well with a lot of the classified intelligence. And this really needs to be taken on board so as to inform really all of their information analysis. All right, let me open the floor for discussion on the 4 IC recommendations I just described.
Safra, one comment. When we propose a CTO for the intelligence community through a transformation of a current role in ODNI, and we hinge many of our other recommendations on that new role. What comes to my mind is the need to socialize that and get feedback on any organizational or political friction to that concept. And I hope we'll be doing that, or we have done that already in your discussions with the agencies.
Well, this is one of those things that is always very difficult because we all know, and sort of as a group, we know that these groups need to work together more carefully. And the problem is they're actually not structured to do that. And that is really in many ways what the original ODNI was set up for. And yet, as you know, these stovepipes continue to work. So this is going to be a difficult issue. I think we heard before a lot from Andrew. It's not always about the difficulty of the technology. Sometimes it's the sociology that's really hard in adopting a change structure. But in some ways, it's one of the reasons we're putting this in structurally. I think that this is going to be a mixed bag. Some folks are going to understand and want to do it. Others, we're going to have a little difficulty.
This is Gilman, Safra. I was in a prior commission on R&D for the IC, which we empowered that role back in 2012. I appreciate the recommendation of your level of effort because it continues in the process to make it more than just a reporting function and actually have major impact. And for the IC, if we really want to move the ball forward and integrating AI into its operational and analytical capabilities, that's the right place to put it. But there is, going to be challenges. But change sometimes is hard. But I think the IC has demonstrated an ability to do so, particularly with that role.
Illy, are there any questions from the audience on the recommendations on the intelligence community?
Not on the intelligence community. I have one comment on the R&E recommendations from Steve Welby. He says these recommendations will only be effective if USD R&E is resourced and staffed with the talent required to support these roles. So I think
we agree with that.
Yep.
We entirely agree with that. That is absolutely true.
All right. To remain on time, I'd like to ask for a vote for recommendations 4, 5, 6, and 7, issue 2, intelligence community, as proposed by SAFRA. For all of the commissioners, all in favor of these 4 recommendations, please say aye.
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 Are there any commissioners who would like to take any of the 4 recommendations and pull them off the 3rd quarter list and take a deeper dive in the 4th quarter? Hearing none, are there any commissioners that need or want to abstain from voting on these 4 recommendations?
Bob, it's Chris Darby. I would like to abstain from the recommendations on the intelligence community.
Noted. Thank you, Chris. Are there any other commissioners? All right. We have a consensus approval of all 7 of the recommendations as laid out by SAFRA. There are no objections to any of them, but one of the commissioners, Chris Darby, has abstained from recommendations 4, 5, 6, and 7. We'll now move right on to line of effort 3, Dr. Griffith is going to split the issues and really talk about the AI workforce and then focus on education. Dr. Griffiths, we probably don't have time to go deep into each one of the recommendations. So as SAFRA did, since all of the commissioners have had an opportunity and the recommendations are going to be online, I'd like you to move through them as quickly as you can.
Yes, sir, I will do. Good afternoon to everyone, to those, to my commissioners and to the people watching this plenary session online. Dr. Bill Mark, Secretary Walk, and Ms. Mignon Clyburn, along with support from our staff team, have developed 33 recommendations that, if adopted, will create dramatic changes in the government workforce and our national pool of AI talent. Creating a government workforce prepared to buy, build, and use today's digital technology is an immense challenge. Today's workforce initiatives are helpful, but quite frankly insufficient to meet the government's needs. Bolder, more aggressive actions are needed, and we believe the following recommendations will meet that need. Our third quarter recommendations for the government's AI workforce are broken down into 8 groups. First, we recommend Congress support a number of very promising initiatives that will improve the military's AI or digital workforce. The Army's AI Task Force's AI and Data Science Workforce Initiative, the Navy Community College, the Air Force Computer Language Initiative, and the Air Force MIT AI Accelerator. Second, if the government doesn't focus on managing its civilian digital workforce, it'll struggle to create the cadre of experts it needs. We recommend the government improves its management of its digital workforce by accelerating its existing occupational series initiatives for software developers, software engineers, data scientists, and knowledge managers, and by fast-tracking an initiative for an AI occupational series. While the creation of 5 occupational series is ambitious, we believe each is long overdue. Third, the government needs to expand and refine its recruitment of civilian subject matter experts. The government dedicates relatively little time or money towards recruiting its civilian workforce. We recommend Congress adopt the STEM Core and AI Scholarship for Service proposals currently before it. The government agencies create digital talent recruiting offices empowered to actively recruit technologists, and that non-DoD agencies create public-private talent exchange programs. Our fourth set of government workforce recommendations addresses military subject matter experts. Digital subject matter experts' inability to spend a career working in digital fields while serving in the military is arguably the single most important issue impeding military modernization. It creates many problems for recruiting, identifying talent, continuing education, maintaining expertise, and retention. We recommend the military services create primary career fields that allow military personnel to focus on software development, data science, or artificial intelligence for their entire careers, either as managers or technical specialists. And we also recommend that the military services create certifications in AI mission engineering, data engineering, safety and responsible AI engineering, and for hardware technicians. And I thought for those people who are looking at this set of recommendations, if you look at issue 4, they may not be familiar with the DoD acronym. So I just want to explain. ASI is additional skill identifiers. AQD is additional qualification designations. AMOS is additional military occupational specialty, and SEI is special experience identifiers. Our fifth group of government workforce recommendations focus on junior leader training and education methods. Junior leaders need to understand how to provide input to machines, understand machine outputs, and when to trust and distrust machine outputs. The application agnostic knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to perform those tasks include problem definition and curation, a conceptual understanding of the AI lifecycle, data collection and management, understanding probabilistic reasoning and data visualization, and data-informed decision-making. We recommend the military services integrate these 5 topics into training for junior officers and senior non-commissioned officers. 6th, we address educating organizational leaders. The government needs organizational leaders with sufficient emerging technology literacy to guide the careers of their subordinates, integrate AI into operational concepts, and make resourcing decisions. We recommend the DoD and military services integrate emerging technologies materials into courses for military officers across the continuum of their education, from officer accession to service level personnel, professional military education. We also recommend DoD mandate emerging technologies short courses for general and flag officers and SES level organizational leaders. DoD should also create emerging technologies designated billets that require personnel to have achieved an emerging technologies qualification prior to assignment. Our recommendations are similar to the existing joint qualification certification process. Our 7th government workforce topic is educating policy professionals. Policy experts are those who don't lead organizations but inform organizational and national policies. We recommend policy experts attend short courses provided by either their agency or a contracted group to expose leaders to AI, its capabilities, and policy relevant topics. And our 8th and final government workforce topic is the acquisition workforce. We recommend the Defense Acquisition University, in partnership with the Undersecretary for Defense for Research and Engineering, annually assess the acquisition workforce's emerging technologies education needs. As necessary, the Defense Acquisition University should design and offer courses addressing new acquisition workforce needs tailored to specific acquisition functional areas. Congress should also support the DAU pilot program attempting to use AI to tailor pedagogy and content to individuals. So that is my description of the first clump, if you like, of these recommendations. So I would throw it open to our fellow commissioners for comment.
Thank you, Dr. Griffiths. For all the commissioners, as I said at the start, we're going to break LOE 3 into 2. We will cover the STEM education right after we consider the 21 recommendations that Dr. Griffiths has already gone over. Are there any comments or concerns from the commissioners?
This is Steve Chen. I just wanted to re-emphasize some of the points that Jose Marie made, that it's extremely important that we up our game in terms of technological literacy, particularly for this very complex topic of artificial intelligence, because the applications pervade really all of the enterprises of the DoD and the IC. So it's a very important topic.
And I would just like to say, for all those listening, if you take a look at our first, second, and third quarter recommendations, LOE 3 has by far the most recommendations. And it is because the commission is absolutely unified on thinking that talent is the key to winning this competition. So I think just the number of recommendations indicates the importance that the commission itself puts upon training and recruiting AI talent.
Yeah, I'd like to add a comment. I think that one of the challenges we have is this war for talent. And we have to consider that broader workforce that's available to us that's somewhere in the between. And that is the people who aren't necessarily able to or engage in going to colleges and universities, but are a productive workforce if given access to training and great access to information and maybe graduated. And I think this is a build upon that thesis that we started back with the first quarter level recommendations, et cetera. So I think it's really important that the community understand that we're trying to help our own people help themselves. And that's the behind the recommendations thesis that's coming out here is how do we get our own community of practicing and authoritative and informed.
I have to concur. I'm sorry, I had a couple of technical difficulties and challenges, But at the bottom line is none of this will happen without people and trained, committed, focused individuals who are allowed and are enabled to help their country stay secure. So it is voluminous, but it's necessary. It is very intentional because it has to be. And it also recognizes, if you look at it, it holistically, if you look at it in its entirety, it reaffirms that education and training does not end at any point in the career or educational track.
Can I just add that we had a question from Trisha Martinez on how we drive more skilled talent to the public sector. And I think this conversation, the number of recommendations you're submitting this quarter, as well as the past quarters, really indicate, as Mr. Work was saying, the importance of getting talented people into the public sector. So I just wanted to highlight the question from Trisha Martinez.
All right, I think we need to move to voting. We have 21 recommendations for training and recruiting AI talent. So we'll vote as a block. All commissioners in favor of these 21, please say aye.
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 Do any of the commissioners want to remove any of the recommendations off the third quarter report and allow us to make a deeper dive into them in the fourth quarter? All right, hearing none, would any of the commissioners like to or be required to abstain from any of the recommendations before us? All right, hearing none, we have unanimous consensus on the 21 third quarter recommendations from LOE 3, specifically on recommendations to strengthen the AI workforce. And now we'll move right to recommendations to improve STEM education.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. We've developed the second set of recommendations that deal with improving all levels of STEM education in America. The current model of STEM education will not meet the challenges of tomorrow. We're encouraged by recent initiatives and legislation to provide more equitable access to broadband internet, the devices and services needed to take advantage of it, and investment in low-performing school districts, but much more needs to be done. This set of recommendations is designed to boost American innovation in AI. Our recommendations address needs across 4 distinct parts of the continuum of learning: K-12 education, undergraduate and postgraduate education, and the reskilling and upskilling of workers once they're in the workforce. In effect, what we're talking about is really expanding and accelerating the pipeline of available talent. While our mandate focuses on AI, not STEM education writ large, there is no way to improve the level of AI literacy in the United States without broader initiatives like the ones that we're presenting today. So first, we need to address the inequality that plagues the K-12 system. Imbalances in access to quality teachers, facilities, and resources, in addition to societal norms that dissuade particular demographics from pursuing STEM and AI, are leading to many students to walk away from STEM at an early age. The result is that an insufficient number of students have either desire or the ability to further pursue an education in STEM. To address this issue, we recommend loan forgiveness for teachers, increased federal funding for teacher training, increased federal support for the creation of STEM and AI curricula, and federal support for after-school and summer programs that focus on STEM and AI education. The second group of education recommendations deals with university-level education. Our university's STEM education system is one of the finest in the world, but among the least prioritized in federal budgets. Numerous leaders in STEM education have stated during interviews with NSCAI staff that improving STEM education in the United States will require a significant investment by the federal government. We recommend a new National Defense Education Act to bolster STEM education at the university level, a mid-career fellowship to retain talent in universities, the creation of a pilot program for artificial intelligence, technology, and education improvements for community colleges, and the creation of AI-specific government internships. The third group of education recommendations deals with reskilling the national workforce. AI and automation have had a profound impact on the American economy and will continue for the foreseeable future. The current AI workforce faces a significant shortfall of qualified applications. Not all jobs will require high-end AI talent that comes from universities, but will rely on skills that can be taught to students and adults outside of the classroom. To address this issue, we recommend support for the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act. The fourth grouping deals with our microelectronics workforce. The United States government needs to invest in its ability to recruit and retain a microelectronics capable workforce. The current microelectronics workforce relies heavily on foreign talent, and there is no clear pathway for US citizen students and practitioners into the design and development of systems that are required for national security. If the government doesn't address this disparity, we risk losing our ability to meet demand for unique hardware needs and becoming overly reliant on uncleared non-US citizens. To address this issue, we recommend congressional support for the private-public academic partnership and the creation of a microelectronics scholar program. Thank you, Bob. We can open this up for comments.
Thank you, Dr. Griffiths. Do any of the commissioners have any comments, concerns, or further discussion on the recommendations to improve STEM education?
Yeah, I would ask, oh, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead.
I was just, I wanted to invite the commissioners on this specific LOE to, if they could just comment on, it seems like STEM education, you know, while we all might feel this is a very important thing, is less directly linked to AI and national security as a topic. And if they wanted to, you know, comment on their choice to recommend putting this in suggest putting this in the recommendations.
Would any of my fellow commissioners like to comment before I do?
Dr. Griffiths, why don't you go ahead and field that one?
Okay. Well, you know, we feel that you know, we need to generally improve the STEM education all the way through the spectrum, because you're going to eventually be siphoning off various of people in that pipeline into various STEM areas. We have recommended the development of AI curricula and supporting educational materials through the K-12 system in the same way that you may remember in one of our former recommendations was to recommend the introduction of computational thinking throughout the K-12. It's a sort of precursor to people being able to ultimately develop the capabilities and skills to move into AI areas. But we're really falling behind in STEM education internationally, and we have been for many years. Our concern is, you know, over the last couple of decades, perhaps even more, we've been looking at trying to improve the STEM education environment, and we never quite seem to get the numbers of people through to the university settings that would allow us to have sufficient numbers of university qualified people, or even community college qualified people into the workforce. So going to a broad STEM education gives people that breadth, but then allows them to specialize as they go forward.
This is Ken Ford following up on Steve's comment. Of course, STEM education is critical. The part that I'm uneasy with is the K-12 recommendations. It's hard to imagine a productive AI curriculum aimed at K-12. The best thing at the K-12 level would be to teach mathematics, and that would put them in good stead. K-12 it seems like the K-12 recommendations don't seem to me as good a fit as the rest of the education recommendations. If we could take a look at those, or perhaps if we could discuss and study those more. But anyway, that's a brief comment on it.
So Ken, if I could just comment, you were breaking up a little bit as you were talking. I think you're saying rather than see sort of AI curricula in the K through 12, really strengthening the teaching of mathematics, similar topics in that spread. I think we'd agree with you. I think one of the big problems we have is the lack of teachers qualified to teach in the K through 12 system. We end up having teachers who themselves are not particularly confident in their ability to teach this topic. So we have to sort of address this at the root, which is actually teachers capable of teaching the required, if you like, foundational topics as we move through the K through 12 system. So I think we could parse that out a little bit more and be a little bit more specific as to the kinds of things we would envision.
I agree. I think this section could be tweaked, just as you said, and maybe a way to incentivize people to go into teaching that have mathematics degrees, actual degrees in mathematics. But in any case, I support the general idea, but not the specifics of these recommendations as they're currently formed.
Yeah, I would also emphasize that I think that I think all of us are in agreement that this is an important topic. The question that I would raise is, what's the strength of the link specifically to AI? I mean, we all believe that STEM is important. We all believe that, good K-12 education is important, but, we're the National Security Commission on AI, not the National Security Commission on, general technical workforce. And so that's the only point that I would raise.
Well, one of the things that I will add to that is what is obvious. Not all districts, not all systems are created equal. And I hate to sound like this, but in some instances, from a teaching standpoint, in integrating some of the tools, educational tools needed, there's going to have to be some improvisation until we get to perfection by way of those who are steeped or proficient in the precise disciplines that are needed in the numbers that we desire. So from my point of view, there are ways to integrate and tweak the curriculum with the less than ideal workforce that you would have educating our children in order to continue to spark and to challenge those students until we get to, again, the integrated numbers we needed by way of faculty and their disciplines. In the meantime, I just think we have to recalibrate and do a little improvisation by way of doing better by our students.
I think I'm supportive of actually the language, and let me present why. I think, first of all, it isn't just the mathematical backgrounds to build the skills to actually use AI, right? I think AI is going to move very rapidly, and I want to make sure that our K through 12 students understand the impact of AI and how to use AI in the STEM-related fields. As I watch how things, a decade ago moved out on robotics, our children now are using, things like Lego Mindstorm to learn about robotics and understand it, how to apply it without necessarily understanding the specific parts, because AI is going to be involved in every piece of our STEM education, but actually in our STEM applications in the workforce. I think this, and I wouldn't want to have to wait into college for them to actually begin to experience that. I think the other point is, I look at our competitors. Our competitors are integrating AI as a part of a framework in their K through 12 programs. So I think from a competitive analysis, while our recommendations may not be perfect because the states and the local governments actually control the education curriculum, I think it does indicate a framework that says if we want to maintain and want to grow our proper use of AI, ethical use and application, that we have to have our STEM education integrate AI into it.
So Gilman, I'm moved by your comments. I would just say that perhaps the phrase that I would use to summarize what you were saying is AI familiarity and comfort with AI is kind of part of what we're trying to educate at that earlier stage.
Agreed.
I think it's pretty well established that the folks who are successful in these technology or information technology careers are ones who've got mathematical understanding, but are also problem solving, team problem solving, and resilience. This is a combination of skills. The idea that you can like just turn a mathematician into a useful AI practitioner is absurd. It's got to be this fuller education where I don't care whether it's biology or physics or theater studies, you're using technology in your education. The thing that I've learned from this discussion, which I feel really stupid for not realizing before, is that we have to listen to K through 12 educators. We've got a pretty clear idea of the set of abilities that we need, but it should not be this commission dictating what things are on the curriculum in order to accomplish these.
I wish we could continue this conversation, which has been very rich. Let me just ask Illy if there are any questions from the audience.
I have questions. I can do them now, or if time allows at the end.
We could take one now, but then we'll move right to voting.
I'll say the question from Trisha Martinez is, what is the timeline for executing on these workforce recommendations?
Bob, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, well, I would just say to those listening, we give recommendations to both the executive branch and to the legislative branch. These are recommendations to the leaders of our government, and it would be up to them to decide at what pace we would pursue them, the resources devoted to them, etc. So I don't think that we as a commission can give you a definitive timeline. We do have a sense of urgency, and we think that we should start addressing this, but we can't give you a definitive timeline. I'm sorry, Dr. Griffiths, I wanted to just jump in there.
No, that makes sense. The one thing I want to add, based on the conversations we've had, we talked about urgency earlier on, and I think this is a critical need. This is an urgent and critical need that we have to pay attention to the K through 12 system, or we are simply going to fail. Maybe not immediately, but we will fail down the road. We just simply won't have the workforce ready to at the kind of scale and scope that we're going to need going forward.
I have one question, a clarification. The loan forgiveness, is that just for math and science, or it's just math, or what were you thinking on that?
Yeah. Sorry, I am unmuted. The loan forgiveness is a little bit more generic, but there are some loan forgiveness programs in place that have focused on specific areas of expertise like math and science, but not all the loan forgiveness programs do. So our recommendations are to reduce the time before loan forgiveness.
All right, we're going to need to move on to voting. Before we do, I have to make one clarification, Dr. Griffiths. In your presentation on the recommendations to strengthen the AI workforce, you jumped over issue 1, sub-bullet 3, support of the Air Force Digital University. I think that was just an oversight as you were going through. I just need to clarify for the record that you were not removing that particular initiative off of your list. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was an oversight. I apologize.
All right, we will now be voting on the 12 recommendations based on the discussion that we've heard over the last 10 minutes. Any commissioners that believe we should take any of these recommendations off for quarter 3 and move them into quarter 4 so that we can take a deeper dive and discuss them, please consider that in your voting. All right. I'd like to ask for a vote on the 12 recommendations as presented on to improve STEM education. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. Do any commissioners want to name a recommendation number to remove off of the Q3 list and for us to look at it more deeply in Q4.
Yes, this is Ken. I'd like to study for Q4 the K-12 recommendation.
So just for verification, Ken, that is recommendation 2 and recommendation 3. Is that correct?
Part 2, issue 1, where we have them listed: loan forgiveness,
yep,
federal funding, that one, AI-focused curriculum, that one. I think something good can be done there, but I think, as I discussed just now with Marie, we could improve it even.
All right. So again, I'm sorry to be obtuse. I just want to make sure I got it right, Ken. So part 2, issue 1, sub-bullet 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 recommendations.
4, and 5.
Oh, okay.
There's 5 of them.
Got it. So all of issue 1.
Right.
Do any of the other commissioners want to add any more beyond those 5 recommendations? All right. Would any of the commissioners like to abstain on any of the 12 recommendations? All right. We have unanimous consensus on recommendations 6 through 12, and we will remove recommendations 1 through 5 from the Q3 report, and we will consider them in greater detail and have more commission debate and discussion on them in the 4th quarter. All right, we're running about 10 minutes behind schedule. Gilman, over to you. And you get brownie points if you can get us back on schedule.
Let's see how fast I can speak. So first of all, thank you. My name is Gilman Louie, and I chair the level of effort 4. I work with Commissioners Chris Darby and Jason Maffini, who worked very hard working through this. And our group focused on recommendations to protect and promote U.S. strategic advantages in AI and its associated technologies. Congress wisely mandated that the Commission study AI and associated technologies. AI exists within a constellation of emerging technologies that enable or are enabled by AI. The United States must prepare for a sustained technology competition across multiple emerging tech. In quarter 3, LOE4 focused on how biotechnology, quantum computing, and microelectronics combine with AI to create new national security risks and opportunities, and provided recommendations to strengthen U.S. leadership in each. Additionally, LOE4 put forth recommendations on improving supply chain resilience and reorganizing the executive office of the President for long-term strategic competition governed by technology. I'll now describe each of the categories of recommendation, and then I'll open the floor for discussion. First, biotechnology. LOE4's first category of recommendations pertains to the intersection of AI and biotechnology. With advances in synthetic biology and genetic editing techniques, biology has become programmable. AI will enable transformational breakthroughs in biological sciences, driving new innovations and discoveries, which will enhance human health and capacity, causing the biotech sector to become a major driver of the U.S. economy's competitiveness and create novel national security challenges. This category contains 4 recommendations, which will include: 1, promote U.S. leadership in key elements of biotechnologies, which will benefit from AI. 2, update the National Biodefense Strategy to address AI-enabled biothreats. 3, highlight ethical problematic use of AI and biotechnology by BGI and the Chinese government. And 4, pursue global cooperations on smart disease surveillance monitoring. The second item we'd like to discuss is quantum computing. LOE4's second category recommendations pertain to the potential impact of quantum computing on the development of AI for national security use case. Quantum technologies have the potential to outperform their classical counterparts on certain problems related to AI, which could create a step change in future AI capabilities. Ensuring U.S. leadership in quantum computing is therefore critical to the future U.S. leadership in AI. This category contains 3 recommendations, which would: 1, publicly announce government interest in specific quantum use cases. 2, make quantum computing accessible to research via the National AI Research Resource. And 3, foster a vibrant domestic quantum fabrication ecosystem. The next area is the microelectronics leadership and critical technology supply chain resilience. LE4's third category of recommendations contains 4 recommendations to further promote AI-enabled microelectronics domestically and improve the resilience of the U.S. supply chain for future suite of critical technologies. These recommendations focus on incentivizing domestic microelectronics fabrication by 1, authorizing and fully fund the Chips for America Act provisions in the NDAA. 2, endorsing a refundable investment tax credit for semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And 3, improving the analysis of supply chains for emerging technologies and the U.S. approach to reshoring key aspects of the production of emerging technologies. Our fourth area is built around technology competitive council, or the creation of one. LE4's fourth categories of recommendations focuses on empowering an entity within the White House to develop a comprehensive technology strategy and ensure continued leadership across scientific, economic, and security aspects of each technology. The Commission offers a range of organizational models which can perform this future function and describe the trade-offs of each. It finally recommended creating a new technology competitiveness council chaired by the Vice President with an assistant to the President serving as the day-to-day coordinator. I will now open the floor for discussions on these 12 recommendations. Bob?
Well, Gilman, I was going to note that the White House just did a nice job. They put together a quantum information service website. So I know the White House is focused on this already.
Yeah, I think the White House has shown a lot of support and leadership, and this recommendation would kind of organizationally create a kind of umbrella approach to taking this area of strategy as a critical function within
my
the White
second
House.
question is, does your subcommittee have any new ideas about how to deal with the semiconductor problem? You know, in some of our conversations, we've indicated that some aspects of hardware technology should not be licensed. But the fact of the matter is that semiconductors are a core component of American leadership. And we're critically dependent, for example, on Taiwan at the moment. Have you guys made any comments about that?
I think we had a large amount of discussions. I think our goal is this idea of reshoring and incentivizing our allies and cooperative nations to move that into the U.S. is one of the reasons why we recommended tax credit capability of people who are investing in semiconductor equipment. The amount of investment is very large. And if we want to have a vibrant domestic capability, that's going to require a significant amount of capital investments. And we wanted to incentivize that capital investment.
Gilman, it's Chris. If I could, Eric, I think there are really 3 components to what we're proposing. One is this reshoring of the merchant fab capacity so that U.S. companies do not feel forced to go offshore. The second is really investment in packaging as a differentiating element to our microelectronics strategy, and that would include new architectures associated with the package. Thirdly, investment in research associated with new materials, new tool sets to enable differentiated microelectronics over a long period of time. Over.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Any other commissioners have any questions for Gilman or comments? Illy, do we have any questions from the audience?
Not on this, Illy.
All right, then we will move directly into the vote. So this is line of effort 4, protect and build up U.S. tech advantages and hardware. Gilman has outlined 12 recommendations in 4 parts. All those in favor of the 12 recommendations, please say aye.
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 All right, would any of the commissioners like to recommend taking any of the recommendations off the Q3 list and pushing them into our final report and our Q4 deliberations? All right, hearing none, do any of the commissioners need to or want to abstain on any of the 12 recommendations? All right, we have unanimous approval and consensus on all 12 of the recommendations put forward by Line of Effort 4. Thank you, Gilman. And you got us pretty much right back on track. So great job. You
Thanks.
did your brownie point. Now we're going to go into Line of Effort 5, which blends right into, which supports a lot of what Gilman said. This is on marshaling global AI cooperation. So Jason, over to you.
I'm Jason Matheny. I'm the chair of the LOE 5 working group. I'm immensely lucky to be joined on this LOE by fellow commissioners Gilman Louie and Chris Darby, and our extraordinarily talented staff, Paul Likas, Quinn Lawrence, Matt Cordova, and Rebecca Kennel. Our LOE has been focused on recommendations for enhancing AI cooperation with our allies and partners. And given that our alliances represent a unique asymmetric advantage for the US, our recommendations focus on leveraging and strengthening those alliances. First, we recommend that the Departments of State and Defense provide clear policy guidance and resource support to NATO's AI initiatives by aligning resources and providing technical expertise to assist NATO in its adoption of AI. We also recommend that NATO look to the Commission's key considerations as a template for developing and implementing a comprehensive AI strategy. The key considerations provide guidance to put into practice overarching principles in the responsible development and fielding of AI. As part of this recommendation, we propose that Department of Defense and State prioritize efforts to achieve common documentation requirements, establish confidence in systems of systems, and ensure robustness and reliability, including mitigating adversarial machine learning attacks. Second, we recommend that the US government pursue formal AI cooperation agreements in the Indo-Pacific region. This includes deepening the cooperation that the US, Australia, India, and Japan have through the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, and expanding the reach of the United States Indo-Pacific defense relationships with New Zealand, South Korea, and Vietnam. Third, we recommend that the United States pursue a coalition of coalitions or mosaic approach to coordinating various diplomatic efforts such as those within OECD, the Global Partnership for AI, the Emerging D10 Coalition, and others. We recommend that the United States look beyond the current landscape towards the potential formation of a broader digital coalition of free and open states to coordinate strategy, promote high standards for digital infrastructure, and serve as a launching point for collaborative work. Because coalitions are not formed overnight, we recommend that the US start efforts to convene a digital summit, including government leaders, as well as NGO, private sector, and international organization representatives. We recommend that the president issue—
Hey, Jason, this is Bob. I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you increase your volume a bit? You're coming in low volume.
I'll try to speak a little louder. How's this, Bob?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We recommend that the president issue an executive order that would create an interagency coordination task force, including the Departments of State, Defense, Commerce, and Homeland Security, the intelligence community, and NIST, charged with sharing threat information and identifying US national security interests related to standards, direct the task force to improve collaboration and partnership with US industry, direct agencies to resource and support improved participation by the US government in international standard setting activities, and foster the creation of a private sector standardization center to improve sharing of best practices and facilitate coordination on focused research and evaluation. Next, we recommend that Congress appropriate funds for a US government team of at least 10 persons to support a US AI standards coordinator. At least 5 persons should come from NIST. There should also be at least 1 representative from the Departments of State, Defense, Homeland Security, and Energy, and the intelligence community. We recommend that Congress create a grant program to enable small and medium-sized businesses to participate in international standards efforts. We recommend that the US government promote AI standards in areas that further US and allied interests in the appropriate and responsible use of AI. This work is informed by the Commission's key considerations that Eric touched on earlier. We recommend the development of a US-India Strategic Tech Alliance. This alliance would build on the already strong relationship between the world's two largest democracies. We see this as a critical piece of making India the focal point of US strategy in the Indo-Pacific region. We recommend a strategic dialogue for emerging technologies with the European Union. This would serve as a cabinet and secretary level forum to strengthen the relationship between the world's two largest economies, with a focus on AI and other emerging technologies. Last, we recommend a blueprint for AI cooperation to guide US government efforts to build robust, high-level, and working group relationships with key allies and partners around AI. The blueprint should build on the work the Commission has done across its line of efforts, including the key considerations. That concludes our recommendations for this quarter from LOE 5. I'll now open the floor to discussion about AI cooperation, and I know Eric is still available to answer questions about the work stream on ethics and responsible use.
So Jason, there's been a term floating around around the concept of a digital 10 or a digital 12. It's something like that. And it's sort of a union of countries that would obviously involve the United States and Japan and a few others. I couldn't tell in your recommendation if that's what you're talking about or you're talking about something slightly different. The idea of the digital 10 or 12, whatever it is that those are the key countries that have to collaborate to counter the size and scale of what China is doing.
Thanks, Eric. We're proposing something slightly different, which is really a framework to draw on existing alliances, given that depending on the tech issue, there could be a substantially different number of countries and composition of countries that are relevant to a tech alliance question. We have the alliances that in combination cover the waterfront. It's really about creating a strategy to help coordinate those alliances in ways that advantage democracies.
I would like to comment that these recommendations really can be tracked all the way back to our interim report, where we talked a lot, and I mentioned earlier that the AI competition, it has an embedded values competition, because the way governments use these technologies will reflect their values. And authoritarian regimes have already shown their proclivity to use these AI as a means to surveil their population, to hold down minorities, and to do other malign activities. So it's very, very important that over time, democracies win this competition so that AI norms and standards will reflect values where we value individual privacy. We do not want to have bias in our AI, which could be used to create problems with minorities. So this is what Jason has laid out for everyone, directly comes from that thought.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and thanks, Jason. I'll just add that just hearing you speak again and looking at the output of the LOE 5 and the joint efforts we had together, getting on the same page with our traditional allies, as well as countries that share our values around the world on these issues of ethics and responsible deployment is going to be critical, starting with high-level principles, and many countries already have enumerated them, but getting into key areas of concern and opportunity, and then even more importantly, going down to the details of engineering implications of ethics and value statements, as well as the goal of trustworthiness. This includes key uses of AI, as Bob just said, privacy issues, inclusiveness, biases, also sharing experiences with AI systems, interoperability, testing and validation, documentation, the role of people, and so on. So I'm very excited about thinking deeply about how we work with partners around the world.
I'll just pose a question from Ryan Sullivan. And I'll just caveat this, that this is part of the final report that we have to look into that. But the question comment is, if we focus on democratic partnerships, allies, do we inherently exclude China, thus forcing our other allies to choose sides, leaving no room for cooperation or rivalry partnerships?
Yeah. My answer to that is that, my hope, and Jason, please, I just had to jump in. My hope is that these key ideas, including ideas of reliability and safety, really need to be looked at carefully by all nations, even potential adversaries. Jason, sorry.
With Eric. Yeah, I think we in our last report will be taking on this question of where we can cooperate on safety with our competitors, so that our competition can be a safe one and not a race to the bottom. One metaphor that we've discussed before is, how do we create the sort of permissive action links in AI, a tool for ensuring certain safety properties that in fact you would like everyone to have, so that it is a safe competition. Over.
And what are the hotlines, to continue that metaphor, that we need to have in place in the future of innovation in national security uses of AI?
Yeah, we'll cover this in the final report, but there are some opportunities to cooperate with our competitors on many different fronts. Not all competition is bad. Sometimes it's good to promote each other's willingness to race in a positive way, but also cooperation. It's not just safety issues. There are other issues that we can cooperate with. But I think, nevertheless, we have to get together with our allies, right, and help each other make sure that we use the appropriate implementation of AI in a safe and secure way for the safety and national security of not just the United States, but our allies as well.
I'll also point out that this topic of safety is a special case of the general question of how can we better understand and model the performance of AI systems. And that's a constant topic of discussion in both LOE 1 and LOE 2. LOE 1, because it's kind of one of the most important and central areas of future research to get a better model and handle on how these systems are going to perform, and then also in many of the high-profile applications, the high-stakes applications in LOE 2, that's a requirement before AI can be properly deployed.
To add a little bit to Steve's comment, this has come up in our discussions on the commission in LOE 1 and LOE 6. We talk about systems of systems and interaction of components. We want to make sure that our own components are, per interactions, we model and understand them. This is a very complex area of AI, how do different agents interact. It gets even more complicated with the interactions of agents across competitive lines, where there might not be the coordination we require. It's complicated enough when we have it on our own, behind our own lines.
I'd like to leverage off of that comment, Eric, because I think people recognize that the global supply chain exists in this domain as well. And inherently, we don't know the full history of what we have in front of us for systems. And we have an obligation to understand enough to be able to have that reliability perspective, that truth perspective, that confidence perspective. And so having relationships across the global environment, utilizing and leveraging our AI, has to have that interdependency brought in.
One more question, comment, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Work. But Jeff Oldham, who's a friend of the commission and has helped us a lot, says, excellent LOE 5 recommendation. Did the commissioners have the opportunity to brief Defense and State Department leaderships regarding these draft recommendations? If so, what was the reaction? So I'll just add, we have worked with the staff at both Department of Defense and State on these recommendations. On our previous quarter recommendations, we did brief the leadership at State. So I would just say we have a really collaborative and working relationship with State Department and Defense so far. Turn it over to Jason if you want to add anything, Jason, there.
No, just thanks so much for the comment, Jeff. And it's been great getting your advice on many of these topics. We look forward to briefing out these recommendations now that they're out. Thank you.
And for recommendation 1, LOE 6 held a wonderful session with agencies across the national security sphere just a few weeks ago with really rich feedback from leads at the agencies.
Sir, you're muted.
Bob, you muted? Oh,
Yep.
There we go.
Generally, the last speaker in any of these types of things, is left over with scraps, has 2 or 3 minutes. So I'd like to move right to voting here so that we can get Chris Darby, our last speaker, the amount of time that he needs to cover his topic. So thank you, Jason, and for all of the commissioners. We're now going to vote on 11 recommendations, Q3 recommendations put forth by Line of Effort 5, Marshall Global AI Cooperation. So all those in favor.
Wild West.
Say again?
Ken, I think you want to mute.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Would any of the commissioners like to remove any of the recommendations and put them into Q4 for further study? Hearing none, do any of the commissioners need or require to abstain from any of the recommendations proposed by Jason and Line of Effort 5? All right, hearing none, we have unanimous consensus on the 11 recommendations of Line of Effort 5. Our last topic is really a special topic, and it's a topic on malign information operations, which I think are an important subject in the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the White House, everywhere. So Chris Darby is going to take us through this special topic, and he has 9 recommendations. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Bob. As it is getting late in the meeting, I will keep my opening remarks very brief. Fellow commissioners, at our direction, the NSCAI staff initiated research on malign information operations enabled by artificial intelligence and subsequently developed 9 recommendations for your consideration. The use of AI and associated technologies by adversarial state and non-state actors to produce, manipulate, and promote malign information will increase the speed and precision of malign information ops executed against the United States. While the methods, means, and goals of adversarial state and non-state actors vary, the pervasiveness of these hostile acts remains the same. And as such, the United States has an obligation to respond to these hostile acts in a way consistent with its democratic interests and values. So, with this said, and in the interest of time, I'll now turn the discussion over to the NSCAI staff to walk commissioners through the 9 suggested recommendations on this special topic. So, staff, over to you to walk them through.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good afternoon, commissioners. Across the national security enterprise, staff has found widespread concern about how AI, ML, and associated technologies can be used to accelerate malign information operations against the United States, our citizens, and our allies. So building on the principles of information statecraft outlined in the 2017 National Security Strategy, Recommendation 1 is to craft a new national strategy for the global information domain to more fulsomely address how AI is changing malign information operations against the US. The next set of recommendations pertain to organizing for this new era. The organization and authorities outlined in the National Security Act of 1947 and subsequent reforms such as the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 do not provide the necessary framework for the US to defend itself against malign information operations. Therefore, Recommendation 2 is for Congress to pass an Intelligence Reform and Malign Information Act. The legislation should, one, create an Interagency Malign Information Operations Center, or a MIOC, to host a joint interagency task force modeled after the National Counterterrorism Center. Two, expand the mission, scope, and authorities of the Election Threat Executive to oversee efforts by the United States government to counter state and non-state sponsored information operations. And three, designate the Undersecretary of Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at the Department of State as a critical position in the fight against malign information operations. The final set of recommendations pertain to adopting a more proactive or an offensive approach to the problem. Efforts by the United States government and private sector to counter terrorist propaganda, for example, offer a potential roadmap for how the United States can go on the offensive to counter and compete against this threat. While counterterrorism and state competition paradigms have stark differences, the NSCAI staff is encouraged by the fact that the United States has fought disinformation in the past. Along those lines, recommendation 3 is for the Department of State to build on existing efforts to build a global coalition to counter and compete against malign information. Recommendation 4 is to deploy for the deployment of malign information watchers to key US embassies and consulates. Recommendation 5 is the creation of a malign information detection and analysis center. You might think of this as the intelligence arm that would be behind the JIADF that could reside in a MIOC. Recommendation 6 is a grand challenge to encourage commercial innovation activity to identify, defend against, and counter malign information operations. And recommendations 7 through 9 recommend modest legislative changes to create better structures for limiting the spread of malign information operations against the openness of our society. Based on the overview of these 9 recommendations, we want to turn the discussion over to the commissioners for any direction they may have.
Are there any commissioners have anything for PJ?
You know, I've obviously looked at this over a long period of time, and I think everything you're recommending we should do, and it's probably still not enough. That would be my reaction. In other words, we've got to rethink how we're going to deal with this, because with the broad ability to do deep fakes and fake text and so forth, it's only going to get seriously worse.
And beyond the synthetic media of various kinds, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg with uses of AI technologies to do psychological operations, to represent human minds and optimize how to best manipulate them over periods of time. This is one of the key issues of our time. It will be a major application area, both in the media space that Eric referred to, and in the psychological space and combinations. So it's just a critical area. And I totally resonate with Eric's comment that this is probably not enough, but
and we will continue to look at this going forward for the final report.
Yeah, I guess I would say, PJ, I think we need a bolder plan. You know, if I were to guess, you need like 100 engineers who are spending all their time combating this in some kind of alarm system that's, you know, public-private partnership of some kind. You know, it's going to take that kind of stuff, more than just monitoring, more than just awareness. It's an active fight. So you have to have active fighters.
You know, on the media part of the story, it's probably going to be the case that detection is going to fail, and and we can talk more about that. Therefore, promoting the new standards on media production and authentication and provenance is going to be critical.
But I think that we want to make sure that we capture the entire picture here. I think this is kind of one way of thinking about this is the dark side of targeted marketing. You could very easily, and I suspect this is going on to a great extent right now, develop targeted messages by profiling different segments of society and deliver them all different messages to manipulate them. And I would also say that we have no idea where this is going to lead. Just as, you know, people did not previously think that commercial jetliners could be used as, you know, weapons of mass destruction, there are all kinds of unforeseen methods and avenues of attack that will develop, and it will change. I'm pretty sure 5 years from now, there will be quite a few numbers of things, numbers of phishing attacks, variants, things like that we never would have imagined.
I think that there's always going to be an arms race, and offense versus defense. It's no different than in cyber. I think, we need to take a step back and begin. And what I like about the MIAC idea is it focuses more on actors and intent, not just on the tech. And you have to put all those together, because these are the same tools that we'll use to be more efficient in summarizing news articles and marketing messages and things that democracies and commercial companies use all the time. But in the hands of the wrong actors with the wrong kind of intent, that's where the problems are. And so we need to continue to focus and build out that trade craft on how to do that analytical work.
I think this issue it's important. I'm kind of echoing Steve's comment on K through 12 education. This is only sort of tenuously related, in my opinion, to artificial intelligence. There are lots of things which, at least for me personally, I feel I'm way out of my depth on, to do with freedom of information and questions around censorship. And I don't know whether this commission should be sort of jumping in with quite such an assumption that we even have the faintest idea how to attack this problem. So, I don't know if other commissioners agree with me, but I feel a little uncomfortable about this one. I'll probably I will abstain and I certainly don't object to proceeding with it, but I want to give a warning that some of these parts of this look to me like they're fighting the last war, and I think as Gilman and Steve said, the next bad things that are going to be done are not actually going to be things that we could prepare for.
If I could just add, give just very brief examples of the kinds of concerns we're finding across the national security enterprise is how AI applications could be used to model fissures in American society, track real-time events that happen along those fissures, and then flood those fissures to exasperate them and tear apart pieces of our society using two-way autonomous communications that's intelligent with video chat and imagery. Those are just to give you a sampling of the kinds of things we hear when we talk to people.
Can I ask Dr. Ford, who's on the phone, and then Dr. Ford?
Yes, thank you. I've been having a sketchy connection. Sorry, folks. I more or less agree with Andrew Moore's comments, but the one that concerns me in particular is recommendation 9. That one, if my colleagues concur, I think that one probably could go to staff. We have a great staff, and do some analysis on that one. It's what I would like to see tabled.
It's Chris Darby. I agree. We should table that, and so the staff will table that one.
Thank you.
So,
Acknowledge.
Yeah, Ken, have you finished, Ken?
Yes, I finished.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to respond to Andrew a bit and to resonate with PJ, there's enough dark matter to be understood that's relevant to the AI pursuit in terms of what can be done, what can be detected when it comes to some of the what's even possible per malicious uses. That warrants study, potential monitoring, potential, and back to Gilman, tracing back to actors and intentions. I do view this as not outside the scope of this commission. As to how we formulate that and shape this, and how we maybe bring in other or point at other agencies that might take this up if they aren't already. This can be tabled for more discussion. The whole section can be tabled for more discussion from my point of view, but I think it's an important one to come back to with vigor.
Yeah, I would say, to respond also to what Andrew said, I think we could separate this into two splinters. I think in one splinter, I would echo what Eric said, which is that the technical aspects of this, how to study and leverage the use of AI, both on the offensive and defensive techniques in this area, I think is clearly within the charter of NSCAI. There is a separate topic, which is more of a policy decision of what would be the use of said technology and regulation surrounding it. And that obviously would be a more controversial topic, and potentially, I'm sensitive to your comment that might be outside of the NSCAI swim lanes.
That makes really good sense. Thank you, Steve. I actually have not thought of it so clearly, but I think you're right. If we break this up into two parts, I think we can probably make it work.
And it's Chris Darby. To the extent that this was a subset of a bigger conversation, the special topic was very much focused, and I think the staff did an excellent job reacting to that somewhat narrow tasking. The broader conversation that we're having right now, I think, is relevant. We'll continue to have it. I would say, and I strongly agree, that we are the National Security Commission on AI, and it is well within our remit to think about the actors and approaches that may leverage this technology against our national interests. So we will continue and broaden the conversation.
And then I would just emphasize, this is something that's centrally AI, because the large-scale customized attacks and defenses, just like in the cyber domain, where I believe that AI is essential, AI has to be involved, because these things are going to be deployed and developed and will need to be responded to so quickly that you will not be able to have a human in the loop.
Katarina, I believe that you have your hand up.
Thanks, Bob. I want to emphasize a couple of the comments, because I think there's very pertinent uncovering of thoughts here that I think has a lot of value. And one is that the description of malign AI has to have characteristics. We have to know what that is, and we then would be able to manage what malign AI is. And I don't think that we necessarily flush that out as we should have or could have in this discussion, because there was obviously an assumption made that that was what we were talking about. And I think that would help a great deal in convening and taking this perhaps to the next quarter, so that we can narrow it down into that appropriate focus.
Thank you, Katarina. Well, first of all, PJ, I'd like to congratulate you. You know, you said the MIDAC is behind the GIADF in the MIDOC. So in one sentence, you had 3 acronyms. So you win the acronym contest this afternoon. Well done.
Poetry contest.
I believe what I hear, and so I will ask for a vote on this proposition. I believe I have heard enough of the commissioners suggest that we should take this block and move it out of the Q3. And as Katarina said, we need to make some more pointed recommendations. As Eric said, we might have to consider even more expansive than we have. I know Dr. Moore is a little, I've heard enough to say that I'm going to move that we take this special project out of our Q3 report and do a deeper dive in Q4. So that is the motion that I'd like to put on the table. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And would anybody like to abstain? All right, then I think we have concurrence that we should move this block of recommendations out. And I just wanted, for those listening, we are not going to have a fourth quarter report. The third quarter report is our last quarter report. What we're going to do now is shift into working on the final report, where we will sharpen our argumentation and consolidate recommendations as necessary. We are just about ready to move into the public comment phase. So, Illy, I'll turn it over to you. I believe you have several questions that we can ask the commissioners to answer for our audience.
Thank you, sir. So just to piggyback on the last topic, Peter Brown, Senior Advisor at the European Parliament, is asking, can you get inspiration from cybersecurity threat information sharing models? I think this goes to you, Steve, what you were recommending. So any comments there, Steve Chen?
Well, certainly. I mean, this last topic relates a lot to, cyber warfare, and I would just emphasize that I think AI is going to be central in that domain, and we need to take that very seriously as a point of emphasis for our national security as well as for global security.
Thank you. Next question, again, from Peter Brown. This goes for Dr. Horowitz. Will the commission also examine the corresponding ethical, legislative, liability, etc. issues regarding the boundary, in quotes, between human decision-making agency and an AI system's authority to act? More particularly, who establishes that boundary, in which context? This is a high-level governance issue affecting all categories of staff and management in any organization. We're looking at this in an ISO standard on the subject, but the standard itself can obviously only go so far. So I'd be interested to hear what the commission thoughts are on this issue.
So first of all, it's a fabulous question, and the question and the directions on answers to that boundary inquiry cut across I'd say all five considerations of the key considerations paradigm that we presented in Q2. But it comes to mind are values, accountability, performance, trustworthiness of AI on tasks at hand, and even the role of humans in the human-AI interaction, a set of issues. Let me just mention that what comes to mind here when thinking about the appropriate definition of the boundary between AI and human decision-making, well, it brings into question or focus the criticality of human accountability. And we've pointed out the critical need to have the buck of any automated action stopping with a human being, and this being well-defined. Other considerations include values, including laws in different areas, the stakes of decisions per consequential nature of decisions that can harm people, citizens, the competency of AI systems, including failures and blind spots and biases. And we often think about automated systems or AI in a boundary, but it's even considerations of, is the AI being used to advise humans in human decision-making, or are humans advising the AI system, providing input? And I'll make a comment that a lot of this goes back to values about ethics and whether AI should be used at all. For example, per our values and laws, AI assistance automation will simply never be appropriate nor tolerated in some areas, like for advising jurors in a jury or serving as a juror. AI will be off limits, even with perfect competency per our core values. So I think it's a really great question, and I worry about an ISO standard. That seems like a simplistic, narrow way to think about these issues.
Sir, go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to ask if any of the other commissioners would like to expand upon what Eric just said.
Sure. The challenge is there are other factors in which AI will find itself trying to solve. If you just think about military systems, for example, right? If you combine stealth and hypersonics, the Russians have just tested a brand new anti-ship missile. So let's say it's flying along at Mach 6 and you can detect it at about 50 miles out. You got 29 seconds to act. Okay, by the time you detect, the humans make a decision, it's already too late. So where's the governance on how do you deal with those kinds of systems? And that's a very simplistic issue relative to more complex ones. So I think the challenge for all of us is to try to put a kind of a rigid framework around these kinds of systems where we don't understand the total interactions or how we're going to have to defend, protect, and hold accountable the humans who deploy these systems. All I can say is I worry every day about the fact that everything seems to point to shorter and shorter decision cycles in which humans are no longer able to react and actually protect.
I'd like to add a comment to this, if possible.
Go ahead, Katerina.
Thank you. I'd offer that we have to look at AI a bit differently. Algorithms are specific executables for an area, for example, that might in one application be quite okay and in another application not be okay. So this isn't a black and white domain. As an enabler in the medical science, the use of recognition techniques has been extraordinarily helpful, but in areas where surveillance is being utilized, it's not. So when we think of AI, the community of practice needs to be able to educate the population that AI has a transferable nature, and we have to understand that. And that is that ethical application discussion that will have to come about. And so remember, translation and application is out there for the use of these type of technologies.
Ilya, I think we have time for one more question from the audience.
Okay, so I'm combining two questions for LOE1. This is from Tina Huang. She says, interested in learning more about creating AI test beds, if there's time to elaborate. And Jim Liu, who says, can you speak a little bit more about what the AI test beds is? This a city in the United States or a place in an agency?
Andrew Moore, I think that one's to you. Andrew, if you're still on, you're muted.
I got to apologize. I was actually not paying attention at that point.
So I'll ask again. Tina Huang says, interested in learning more about creating AI test beds, if there is time to elaborate. And then Jim Liu says, can you speak a little bit more about what are the AI test beds? Is this a city in the United States or a place in an agency?
Very good. So they will probably be a combination of physical and virtual. So a physical test bed is something like an autonomous driving range, or there are, for instance, for work on disaster scenarios, there are already sort of artificial disaster scenarios set up for folks to practice with robots, computer vision, human sensing systems on. So there are test beds of that form, and then there are there are also completely software-driven things for running performance trials of different classes of machine learning algorithms or optimization algorithms.
All right. Well, I think we're going to cut off the remaining questions. And before I turn it over to Eric Schmidt for the closing comments, I would just like to say this is likely going to be our last public meeting in 2020. So on behalf of Eric and all of the commissioners, I'd like to thank the White House and Congress, the Departments of Defense, State, and Energy, and all of the departments that we've been working with, academia and industry, for the tremendous support that we have received as a commission. It's been bipartisan, it's been enthusiastic, and I would just like to thank all of those who have helped the commission go through these weighty issues. I'd also like to thank the commissioners. I hope the listeners get a sense that each and every one of the commissioners are fully engaged in this. They're committed to the idea that AI is a competition that we have to win, and that there are a lot of steps we have to do to make sure that we do. So to all of the commissioners, thanks so much. I'd also like to thank the staff. They're the ones that do the heavy lifting in terms of the analysis, the writing, the recommendations to the commissioners on what we should consider. They've just been terrific. And Ili Bajraktari, the executive director, we couldn't have asked for a better one. And for all of those who joined us this afternoon, as I said, there's a lot of things that you could do on a Thursday afternoon. I think it's Thursday. I can't even remember anymore. But, you know, there's a lot of things that you could do. But sharing your time with us gives us a lot of it's just the support that we as commissioners really appreciate. So thanks to everyone who has worked on this endeavor and continues to work. And I'll turn it over to Eric, our chairman, for the final remarks.
Just a quick comment. I agree with everything Bob said. I could not be prouder of the commission and the staff. And I hope those of you watched our FACA compliant meeting saw the way we work, which is we actually argue over the stuff and we do care a lot. And I'm sure the things that we did not agree with today, we will resolve over the next few months. So for those of you, I guess we'll see you early in the next year. And thank you all for the time, the approvals, and Illy and our DFO. Angela, I'll let you finish.
Thank you so much. On behalf of NSCAI, we want to thank you for attending today's meeting. This meeting is adjourned.